You never truly understand how quiet a neighborhood can be until the neighborhood wants you to hear nothing. And that's how East Bramblewood greeted me on the day I moved in. Silent, motionless, obsessively ordinary. If you'd seen it from a distance, you'd swear it was a dream suburb. Rows of pristine houses, identical lawns trimmed at perfect angles, white mailboxes shining like polished teeth. But up close, something felt wrong. Like a painting so perfect it becomes disturbing. Like a smile held too long. And if you ask me where everything began, where the dread seeped in, where the tension took root, it started the moment I opened the door and stepped out of the moving truck. Because everyone was watching. Not obviously, not curiously, not even angrily. They watched like people who already knew the ending of a story and were waiting for me to catch up. The welcome committee. The first person to approach me was a woman in a beige blazer and a pinned HOA badge shaped like a tiny house roof. Martha Linsdale, HOA president. Her smile stretched unnaturally wide, as if pulled tight by invisible hooks. She walked straight toward me without blinking once. "Welcome to East Bramblewood, Gabriel. We've been expecting you." The way she said it, I felt like someone had poured ice water down my spine. I forced a smile and shook her hand. "Nice to meet you. How did you know my name?" She lifted a clipboard. "We always know who's entering the community." A man in a blue polo appeared behind her, holding a camera. No lens cap, no hesitation. He snapped a picture of me before I could react. Click. I stepped back. "Hey, what?" Martha touched my arm gently, too gently. Her fingers lingered like something cold and wet. "Don't worry. Documentation. All residents are recorded upon arrival. Part of the bylaws." "Which bylaw?" "You'll learn." Behind her, another man wheeled out a large metal box with the HOA seal on the front. A scanning device. I didn't know it then, of course. Not yet. He scanned the air around me. The machine hummed, then beeped, long and low, like a warning. Everyone paused. Martha's eyes flicked briefly toward the man. He shook his head. Her smile didn't break. "We'll deal with that later. For now, welcome home." I didn't breathe for several seconds, because I had seen something. Behind Martha, through the perfect cut of the hedges, a face in the window of House 12. A child, but impossibly still. Eyes dark and unblinking, watching me. Not moving, not blinking, like a doll. 2. The house that wasn't empty. My house, 17 Hollyoak, was supposed to be vacant for months. That's what my realtor told me. But the moment I crossed the threshold, my skin prickled, because someone had been inside. Not recently. Not in a natural way. The air felt wrong, heavy, stale, thick with something like old breath that had nowhere to escape. I stepped into the living room and froze. Faint shapes in the carpet, indentations, as if chairs and tables had been arranged here. But the house was empty. Only the marks remained. In the hallway, the wallpaper peeled slightly, not from age, but from being disturbed. In the bedroom, I found dust patterns where objects had once stood. A mirror, a lamp, maybe even a crib. But every object was gone. It felt like someone had lived here for years, and left only minutes before I arrived. Even the closet door was warm, as if touched recently. I stepped back, heart pounding. The house wasn't empty. It was erased, wiped clean, but not forgotten. I didn't sleep the first night, not because of fear, though fear came later, but because the house made noises no empty home should make. Creaks that sounded like footsteps, clicks like nails tapping wood, soft thuds in the walls, and twice, not once, but twice, I heard the sound of a doorknob turning, very gently, as if someone was testing it. At 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Keep your windows closed." I froze. Who sent that? Why? I walked slowly toward the front window, and I saw them. Across the street, 3 neighbors standing on the sidewalk. Not talking, not moving, just facing my house, staring. Their faces were unreadable, expressionless, lit only by the street lamp's cold glow. I stepped back. Then a second message. "Do not let them see you watching." My palms went cold. I ducked behind the wall, peeking only enough to see. They were still staring, still motionless. Still, but I stayed away from the windows until sunrise. When I looked again, they were gone. The next morning, a loud knock shook the door. Not a normal knock, the kind of knock someone uses when they want to remind you they have authority. I opened the door to find Martha again, flanked by the man with the camera and a new figure, an older man in dark clothes holding a large black binder labeled Bramblewood Enforcement Division. I forced a polite tone. "Can I help you?" Martha's voice was crisp. "Routine inspection." She brushed past me as if I didn't exist. The cameraman followed. The older man stood at the threshold. He didn't enter. He simply looked at me, deeply, coldly, studying me like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. "Routine," he repeated quietly. He closed his binder with a sharp snap. "We don't want any misunderstandings." Inside the house, Martha was already in the kitchen, opening cabinets. "We check for compliance." Compliance with what? Everything. She walked into the living room, stopping at the faint carpet marks. Her smile flickered, then vanished entirely. She crouched down, touching the indentations. "Did you move furniture in here?" "No, nothing's moved. It was like that when I arrived." The cameraman looked up sharply. For the first time, Martha's mask broke. Just for a second. Fear. Real fear. She stood, smoothed her blazer, and forced her smile back into place. Must be old staging marks. But I saw her hands. They were shaking. 5. The Ledger of Occupancy. Before leaving, the older man handed me a thin booklet. Black cover. Gold letters. "East Bramblewood Residential Ledger. Occupancy Rules. Study this," he said. "Your name will be added soon." Added? To what? When I opened the booklet, my heart stopped. There were lists, pages of names, residents, move-in dates, compliance levels, infractions, and then status collected, status replaced, status retired. Dozens of them. One name was scribbled out violently, ink smeared across the page. Resident 17, non-compliant, removed. My house, my address, the resident before me. Removed? Removed how? And why was the name destroyed like someone didn't want it read? At the bottom of the page was a note in handwriting that didn't match the rest. "Do not let them add your name." My hands trembled. Someone had written that secretly. Someone living here before me. Someone who didn't survive. On the 4th day, I walked past House 12, the one where I had seen the motionless child. The house looked normal in daylight. Too normal. Perfectly symmetrical hedges, spotless windows, identical curtains. But when I reached the sidewalk, the front door opened soundlessly. A woman stepped out, her face pale, eyes hollow, smile brittle. "Welcome," she whispered. Something clung to her voice. Something that made my stomach twist. But what terrified me wasn't her. It was the child standing behind her. The same child I saw through the window. The child who never blinked, who was still staring at me the same way now. Lifeless, unmoving, pupils too wide, skin too smooth. Like a human-shaped photograph, I forced myself to speak. "Hi, I'm Gabriel." The woman's smile widened into a sharp, unnatural stretch. "We know who you are. Do you like it here?" She tilted her head, slowly, mechanically. We follow the rules. Her hand tightened on the boy's shoulder, too tightly, painfully tight. But he didn't flinch, not even slightly. His eyes stayed locked on mine, empty, soulless, watching. I stepped back. The boy stepped forward, perfectly synchronized to my movement, as if mirroring me. The woman's voice lowered to a whisper. "You should go home now, Gabriel, before they notice you're wandering." "Who?" Her eyes flicked toward the HOA office building down the street. "Everyone." She shut the door quietly. As soon as it closed, every light in the house flicked off at once. Complete blackness behind the windows. The boy's silhouette remained. Still watching. 7. The night everything shifted. On the 5th night, I heard something inside the house. Something I couldn't explain. A rhythmic tapping coming from the hallway. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. Soft, deliberate, almost polite. I crept toward the sound, heart pounding. Halfway down the hall, the tapping stopped. Then, the closet door creaked open. Very slowly. I froze. The darkness inside the closet felt. I reached for the hall light switch. It didn't turn on. Then I saw it. On the inside of the closet door, a mark, a black handprint. Small, child-sized, and beneath it, scratched into the wood. "Don't let them inspect you again." I stumbled backward, hit the wall hard. My phone buzzed. Same unknown number. "You need to get out of the house now." My breath hitched. Then another message. "They're coming." Before I could react, headlights washed across my living room windows. A car. Pulling into my driveway. A black SUV with the HOA emblem. 2 silhouettes inside, watching the house. Engine idling, waiting. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The SUV door opened. A figure stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, holding a large black binder labeled Bramblewood Enforcement Level 2. The man from the first inspection. He looked straight at my window, straight at me. Then he lifted a device, a scanner. He pressed a button. The device lit up, red, beeping in slow intervals, searching for me. I ducked behind the couch, my chest tight, my breath silent. The beeping grew louder, closer. Then the man's voice through a speaker. "Resident 17, this is a compliance check." I pressed myself against the floor, silent, terrified. He stepped onto my porch, boots heavy, deliberate. "Open the door. Non-compliance escalates your status." Status, the word from the ledger. Removed, replaced, collected. "No, not like this, not now." The doorknob turned, slowly, very slowly. Then, a loud, sudden knock. The man froze. Someone else was knocking at the door. From inside the house. The knock came again. From upstairs. Loud, impossible. The HOA enforcer stepped back, startled. Then the knocking spread. To the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Fists pounding everywhere, as if the house itself were full, overflowing. Alive with trapped people pounding to get out. The enforcer panicked, stumbling away from the porch. He ran to the SUV and sped off, tires screaming. And just like that, the knocking stopped. Instant silence. Complete and total stillness. I stood up slowly and realized the house protected me. But why? And from what? And who did the knocking? 8. The truth begins to show. I found a message slipped under my dew. Don't trust the HOA. Don't trust the houses. Save no one. Run only when the house lets you. There was no signature, but on the back, a symbol was drawn. A house with a black circle around it and a line through the doorway. A warning, a marker. And suddenly I understood the feeling I'd had since arriving. East Bramblewood wasn't just corrupted. It wasn't just haunted. It wasn't just controlled. It was alive, watching, choosing, waiting, and for reasons I couldn't understand yet, it had chosen me. They say the fear in Westridge Heights began not with a scream, but with a letter that no one admitted to sending. If you speak to the earliest residents, the ones who still sit on their front porches, even though their eyes stay fixed on the cracks in the street, you'll hear the same thing. It started with a notice that didn't belong. The documentary crew who interviewed them years later described their expressions as drained, as if talking meant reliving the moment the neighborhood changed forever. And for the family at the center of everything, the Navarro family, it was the day they found that letter tucked beneath their door that would bind them to a history darker than anything the Homeowners Association had ever documented. The strange thing? The envelope had no stamp, no seal, no official HOA mark, just their last name written in thick black ink, the letters jagged and uneven, like someone wrote it in a hurry or in fear. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to go back to the day after the incident on Wrenwood Trail. The day Lucas Navarro's voice was first heard echoing from the back of Oak Bend Forest. The day the HOA denied everything. The board president, Marjorie Hale, claimed she had no knowledge of any missing resident, any incident, any scream, or any forest-side commotion, though multiple residents swore they saw 2 board members rushing out that night with flashlights and clipboards. Marjorie simply smiled her tight, thin smile. A misunderstanding, she insisted. A routine perimeter check. A phrase that appeared again and again in their incident reports. But no one believed her, especially not Isabella Navarro, Lucas's older sister. The documentary audio captures her voice even now, shaking, angry, exhausted, but steady enough to make every viewer listen. My brother wasn't a misunderstanding. He was a person. He was scared, and something in those woods took him. But what happened next was stranger. The HOA sent a violation letter to the Navarros at exactly 8:12 a.m. the next morning. The violation? Unauthorized nighttime disturbance. And beneath that, in smaller print, non-compliance with after-hours sound policy. This will be recorded as strike 1. The neighborhood watched the family break that letter apart on the porch steps, every torn edge fluttering across their driveway like tiny white warnings. It should have ended there. It should have just been cruelty, or insensitivity, or HOA procedural nonsense. But then came the second letter, the one no one claimed to deliver, the one that started everything. It appeared under their door while the entire family sat awake in the living room. Lights on, voices low, trying to figure out who to call and what. And the smell, that faint, strange scent like old books left in a storm cellar. Documentary footage shows the envelope itself, recovered months later from the Navarro case box. Brown, weather-stained, faint streaks of something like ash along the edges. Inside, a single sheet of paper. At first glance, it looked blank. But when Isabella held it near the light, dark words began to appear, like invisible ink reacting to heat. You should have answered the first call. Now the second call will not stop. No signature, no explanation. Just those 14 words. The second call? What first call? Was it Lucas's voice echoing in the forest? Was it something else entirely? The family didn't know it then, but they had just been marked, and Westridge Heights had a long history with marked families. The next morning, the HOA arrived again, this time in person. 3 board members, 3 clipboards, 3 unsettlingly polite smiles. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as the Navarros stood on their porch in pajamas, exhausted, faces streaked from crying. But the board didn't ask about Lucas. They didn't offer condolences. They didn't even mention the forest. Instead, they asked one question. Did you receive the notice? Not a notice, The notice. Isabella told them yes, but when she tried to hand the envelope to them, all three board members recoiled, the way someone might recoil from a live animal. Marjorie refused to touch it. "Destroy it," she whispered, immediately. Her voice trembled. Her eyes darted to the forest edge as though checking if something was listening. When the Navarros asked what the message meant, the HOA offered no answers, only a threat disguised as a reminder. All documents delivered to homeowners, official or unofficial, must be reported and surrendered. Failure to comply may result in penalties under Article 25, disruptions of order. And the documentary narrator pauses here, letting the silence hang, letting viewers feel the creeping dread. Because the key detail the HOA didn't know was this: Isabella didn't destroy the letter. She hid it. Somewhere safe. Somewhere the HOA wouldn't find it. But someone or something already knew. That night, the second call began. The audio captured from the Navarro home is terrifying, even degraded after years of handling and evidence transfers. At 2:47 a.m., a sharp knocking echoed through the hallway. Not at the door, not at the windows, at the walls. Slow, deliberate strikes, as though someone was knocking from inside the wooden beams. Each knock came in sets of two. 2 knocks, silence. 2 knocks, silence. 2 knocks again. Isabella screamed for her parents, and her father grabbed a flashlight and rushed into the hall. The knocking continued, steady, rhythmic, patient, working its way along the wall toward Lucas's bedroom. "That's W." Her father pressed his ear to the wall, then jumped back violently, stumbling across the floor as his face drained of color. He claimed, later, shakily on the recorded testimony, that he heard something speak, not in words, not in any human language, but a sound, a breath, a soft, dragging inhale, like someone buried deep in the wall was trying to breathe through the wood. He ordered the family out of the house immediately. But the Navarros never made it past the living room before something else happened. Something captured faintly on the old security camera. The front door unlocked itself. The deadbolt turned. The latch clicked. The door cracked open, slowly, silently, as if someone on the other side was waiting to be invited in. The air pressure changed. Curtains shifted. The temperature dropped. Isabella's mother whispered, "Lucas?" Her voice barely audible. The door opened a few more inches. A shape stood on the porch. As the figure took its first step toward the threshold, something else happened. A voice whispered through the house. It wasn't human. It wasn't male or female. It wasn't even directional. It was everywhere. Inside the walls, inside the floor, inside the air. The whisper said only one word: return. The figure froze, then slowly turned away from the house and walked into the forest. The front door slammed shut. By sunrise, the HOA had taped a new notice to the Navarro door. Violation: tampering with entry security devices. Fine $350. It was absurd. It was insulting. It was inhuman. But the message beneath the printed text, handwritten in the same jagged script as the secret letter, was worse. You hid the first warning. You cannot hide the second. The Navarros would stay awake for 3 nights after that, flinching at every echo, every gust of wind, every creak in the wooden beams, because the knocking never stopped. Not for a single hour, and every neighbor who heard it pretended they didn't. Not out of cruelty, not out of apathy, but out of fear. Because Westridge Heights had seen this before. The HOA knew exactly what was happening. The forest knew too. Even the houses knew. And the documentary narrator ends part 2 with the most chilling line in the entire case file. The Navarros were not the first family marked. They were simply the first in a long time. If you interview the residents of Westridge Heights now, years after the Navarro incident, long after the lawsuits, the evacuations, the abandoned homes, they will all tell you the same thing. The houses changed first. Not the people, not the forest, not even the HOA. The houses. They started listening. Then they started watching. And for the Navarros, already sleepless, already drowning in dread, the first sign of this change came the morning after the knocking began. Because the house did open its eyes, just not the way anyone expected. It began with a small detail most families wouldn't notice. But the Navarros, by now hypersensitive to anything unusual, saw it instantly. When they entered their living room that morning, every single picture frame on the wall was crooked. All of them, leaning slightly left, every one at the same angle. Their house had stood perfectly still all night. No earthquake, no windstorm, no intruder. Yet every frame was tilted, every memory shifted, disturbed, touched. And one picture was missing completely. Lucas's birthday photo. Isabella found the frame lying face down in the center of the rug. The glass wasn't cracked. The nails weren't bent. It looked as though someone had carefully removed it from the wall, examined it, and placed it gently on the floor. But the picture itself, the photograph, was gone. Just the empty frame remained. Her mother broke first. Frames don't walk off walls, but something did. Something was moving through the house without their permission. The documentary narrator pauses here, then adds, "What the Navarros didn't yet realize was that their home had already been cataloged, identified, chosen." The truth became even clearer an hour later when Mr. Navarro tried to leave for work. The front door wouldn't open. Not jammed, not stuck, not blocked. It just wouldn't open. The lock turned. The deadbolt slid. The knob rotated freely. But the door stayed fixed in place, as though fused to the frame. He tried the back door next. Same thing. Then the garage. The garage door motor hummed, strained, then groaned to a stop without lifting even a millimeter. It wasn't mechanical failure. It wasn't a power outage. The exits were refusing to open. The house was refusing to let them leave. When Mrs. Navarro attempted to call emergency services, her phone displayed a chilling message: no network, area restricted. The documentary technologists who examined the phone logs explained the message. That phrase doesn't exist on any major carrier. It's not an error, it's a command. A command from somewhere inside the neighborhood, or underneath it. At 10:14 a.m., the HOA arrived again. 3 knocks on the door, perfectly spaced, perfectly timed. They knocked as if they knew the Navarros were trapped, as if they knew the house was tightening around them. Marjorie Hale stood on the porch wearing that same plastic, too-wide smile. Behind her, 2 board members holding tablets, strange, unbranded devices none of the residents had seen before. The HOA didn't have tablets. They had paper, forms, clipboards. Yet here they were with high-tech monitoring equipment. From inside the house, the Navarros yelled through the door that they couldn't open it. Marjorie's expression didn't change. She simply tapped her tablet and the deadbolt clicked itself back into place. The door unlocked. The documentary caption reads, "External override activated." The door swung open on its own, and Marjorie stepped inside without permission. The 2 board members followed. For a long moment, everyone simply stared at each other. The Navarros were pale, exhausted, terrified. The board members were stern, controlled, almost robotic in their posture, as if every breath was measured and rehearsed. Marjorie spoke first. Calm, cold, detached. "Your home is experiencing what we call a compliance interference." Isabella's father demanded to know what that meant. Her reply chilled everyone watching the documentary years later. "It means the house feels you're not cooperating." Houses don't feel, not in any human way, not unless something inside them Something deeper, older, is doing the feeling. Mrs. Navarro held up the mysterious letter, the one that slid under their door, the one the HOA insisted they destroy. Marjorie's mask finally cracked. Her right eye twitched. Her voice dropped to a whisper almost too soft for the camera mics to catch. "You kept it." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. The room temperature fell sharply. The lights flickered. One of the pictures on the wall snapped violently into place, straightening itself with a loud crack. The board members flinched. Marjorie swallowed hard, gripping her tablet so tightly her knuckles whitened. "This house," she whispered, "is responding." Isabella forced the question. Responding to what? All three board members answered at the same time, not in unison, not rehearsed, but out of urgent fen. The documentary narrator explains the history here, history the Navarros didn't know. Westridge Heights had a pattern, a cycle. Every few decades, a specific home would become active. It would choose a resident, follow them, whisper to them, call to them. And if that call was ignored, or interrupted, or resisted, the house would escalate. At first with noises, then with movements, then with manipulation of the interior layout, and finally, with claiming. The HOA wasn't created to manage the neighborhood. It was created to contain the cycle, to keep residents quiet, to keep the entity fed, to keep the house satisfied. Human lives were the cost. Compliance was the illusion. Order was the currency. And Lucas was the chosen one this cycle. The first call was his disappearance. The second call was the knocking. And now the house was waiting for the third, the final, the irreversible. Marjorie stepped forward and reached for the brown envelope. Isabella yanked it away, shouting, "You had something to do with what happened to my brother." The two board members tensed, but Marjorie shook her head. "No, we tried to prevent it. We always try." Her voice cracked with something like genuine sorrow. "The house chose him, not us. We only respond to the choices." Her eyes darted toward the hallway, toward Lucas's room. "Has the room changed yet?" she asked. Isabella blinked. "What do you mean, changed?" Before Marjorie could answer, the lights dimmed to near blackness. The house let out a long, low groan, wood stretching, beams shifting, foundations tightening like a creature waking up. Every door in the hallway slammed shut. Then slowly, deliberately, Lucas's door opened by itself. Just a crack. Just enough to see. Not normal darkness. Not shadow. A thick, pitch-black void that looked like it had depth. Like it was sinking downward. Like the room wasn't a room anymore. The house was transforming, rearranging, becoming something new, something ancient, something hungry. The two board members stepped back toward the exit, but Marjorie didn't move. She stared at the open door with an expression that combined awe and dread. "It's stronger this time," she whispered. "Much stronger." Then she said something that made Isabella's mother collapse onto the couch, sobbing. "Your son may still be alive. Not alive in the traditional sense, not breathing, not conscious, but alive within the cycle, alive inside the house, inside whatever the house had become." Marjorie lifted her tablet. An infrared blueprint appeared. Blue lines forming the skeleton of the Navarro home, but Lucas's room was wrong. It didn't show walls, or furniture, or space. A swirling absence where the room should be, like a hole punched through reality. Mrs. Navarro screamed. Marjorie finally stepped backward, fear overtaking her composure. "We can't stop it," she said. "We can only record it." A pause. "And you can only survive it if you surrender the letter." Isabella clutched the envelope to her chest. "No," she whispered. The house groaned again. The sound cut through the floorboards, the walls, their bones. And then the hallway darkened. Not from the lights going out, but from something moving toward them, something crawling out of Lucas's room. Slow, dragging, heavy. A shape, a silhouette, a massive shadow with deep, twisting hollows where eyes should have been. The board members ran. Marjorie screamed for them to stay still. She shouted that movement provoked it. But fear overcame discipline. They fled the house, leaving the door wide open, leaving the Navarros inside, leaving Isabella staring into the hallway where the shadow shape grew larger, heavier, closer. The documentary camera zooms on Isabella's trembling voice as she recounts the moment. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't my brother. It was the house. A piece of it. A part of it. Coming to take back what we tried to hide. The shadow reached the living room doorway. The floorboards bent under its weight. And the final sound of part 3 is simple. A small, calm whisper coming from the envelope in Isabella's hands. A whisper that said, "Third call." The night was unusually silent for Springdale Ridge. No lawnmowers, no barking dogs, no distant arguments about fence heights or parking violations. Just a heavy, eerie stillness rolling over the neighborhood like fog. And right in the middle of this silence, Mia stood outside the HOA community center. Its lights dim, its windows dark, its giant oak door locked with a chain that looked older than the neighborhood itself. She wasn't supposed to be here. Actually, according to the HOA bylaws, Section 14C, Paragraph 7, nobody was supposed to be here after 7 p.m. without written permission from the board. It was 11:42 p.m., but tonight, Mia wasn't thinking about bylaws. She was thinking about one thing. The keycard she found inside President Hargrove's office drawer. A keycard labeled only with a single word, archives. A place the HOA handbook mentioned once, in a footnote that casually said, archived materials are stored securely and are not accessible to general members. Nothing else. No location. No details. No explanation. But Mia had seen a map taped to Hargrove's wall earlier that day. A map that showed a room behind the community center gym that she had never noticed before. A room that didn't appear on the public versions of the floor plan. Tonight, she was going to open it. The hidden hallway. Mia walked along the side of the building, careful to avoid the security lights. Her hoodie was pulled low, her footsteps silent on the cold pavement. She reached the back door, the one employees use during big events and HOA meetings. She swiped the keycard. Nothing. She swiped again, slower. A soft click. The door slid open half an inch. Mia exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding and slipped inside, letting the door close quietly behind her. The hallway was dark. Only the faint glow from an emergency exit sign flickered at the far end. The smell of old paint and storage crates hung in the air. The walls were lined with framed photos of past HOA presidents, each smiling stiffly, each face somehow unsettling in the shadows. And then she saw it, a narrow passageway she had never noticed before, wedged between the janitor's closet and the yoga studio, a place that seemed intentionally hidden. The keycard scanner next to it blinked red. "Well," Mia whispered, "here goes nothing." She tapped the keycard. The light flashed green. The door unlocked. The moment she stepped inside, she felt it. Cold. Not normal cold. A sharp, unnatural cold, like the air hadn't been disturbed for years. Rows of metal file cabinets stretched into the darkness. Old cardboard boxes stacked all the way to the ceiling. Shelf after shelf labeled with dates going back 30 years, long before Mia had even been born. She grabbed a flashlight from her pocket and clicked it on. Dust drifted through the beam. Silence wrapped around her like a blanket. She walked down the aisle, scanning labels. Parking violations, 2001 to 2010. Noise complaints, 1994 to 1999. Unauthorized renovations, permanent bans. Board misconduct reports, sealed. That last one made her stop. Sealed? HOA reports didn't get neighbors arguing. Broken fences, damaged community property, cars keyed, windows smashed, people yelling at board meetings. But one thing stood out. In almost every photo, someone was watching from the background. A man, tall, dark coat, no expression on his face, never interacting, always watching. There was a name written on the back of each photo. Case, Harrow. Mia frowned. She had never heard the name Harrow in Springdale Ridge. She flipped through folder after folder, every one filled with documents about the same man. Incident reports, warnings, letters of concern from neighbors, and then a termination letter addressed to Harrow Ellis, former HOA board member, Security Oversight Committee, dated 12 years ago. It said only one thing: you are hereby removed from all duties. You are no longer permitted on HOA property. Consider this your final notice. No explanation, no details. Nothing except a final handwritten note at the end. Do not let him near the vault. The vault? Mia blinked. There was a vault? Where? Her light hit something metal, something big, something she didn't notice before. The steel door. At the back of the archives room was a massive steel door, not like a normal utility door. This looked like a bank vault door, thick and reinforced, with a turning wheel in the center. A keypad glowed faintly beside it, waiting for a code. What on earth is an HOA hiding behind a vault door? Mia muttered. She stepped closer. No sign, no label, nothing written. Just a door so out of place it made her skin crawl. She reached out and touched it. Ice cold. The keypad screen flickered suddenly. Then a message appeared. Access restricted. Board members only. Mia stepped back instinctively. A vault. Secret files. A banned board member stalking old photos like a ghost. What was this place? She leaned forward, trying to inspect the keypad for clues. And then, thud. Something slammed against the steel from the inside. Mia froze. Her heart stopped. Another thud, louder. Then a scraping sound. Metal against metal. Something was moving behind the door. Something alive? Mia backed away, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The scraping stopped suddenly. Then a faint whisper. Not a voice she could understand. Not clear words. Just breath. Like someone was standing inches from the other side of the door. Listening. Mia held her breath. Who's there? She whispered. Silence. Then, slowly, a single sentence came through the steel. You shouldn't be here. Her blood ran cold. She stumbled backward, knocking into a cabinet. Files spilled everywhere. And then she heard footsteps. Fast, heavy, running, from the hallway. Someone else was here. Mia shut off her flashlight and ducked behind a stack of boxes. The archives door swung open. Footsteps entered. Two voices whispered urgently. Hargrove. She recognized the HOA president's tense whisper. And another board member. Ms. Delaney. Is the door secure? Delaney hissed. It should be. Hargrove whispered back. But someone was in here. Look at this mess. My God, what if he's waking up? Hargrove shivered. Then we're out of time. Delaney stepped closer to the steel vault. Do you know what happens if this door ever opens again? Yes, Hargrove said grimly. The entire neighborhood will fall apart. Delaney grabbed his arm. Then we need to find whoever came in. Now. Their footsteps backed out of the room. The door slammed. Shh. Silence returned. Mia waited until she couldn't hear anything else. Her breathing was shaky, but determined. She stepped out from behind the boxes, staring at the vault. There was someone, or something, inside that steel room. Something dangerous enough that the HOA hid it for over a decade. Something connected to Harrow. Something the board feared. And something that had just spoken to her. She grabbed the nearest folder, one labeled Harrow Final Actions, and stuffed it into her backpack. Then she retraced her steps through the dark hallway, slipped out the back door, and vanished into the night. If you ask the remaining residents of Ashridge Vale what they remember about that day, they won't mention the missing people or the blackout or even the HOA board that vanished without a trace. No, they will mention the silence. A silence so total, so unnatural, so absolute, that people still wake up screaming decades later, convinced they've heard it again. Because silence like that isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of something else. Something listening, something waiting. And part 5 of this tragedy, the day the streets went silent, is the moment every timeline of Ashridge Vale collapses into the same horrifying truth. 7:14 a.m. According to the corrupted security logs recovered later, the sky over Ashridge Vale hung in a murky gray that morning, thick as wet cement. Not cloudy, not foggy, just wrong. A top layer of air that felt heavier than it should, pressing down on the roofs, bowing trees as if gravity itself had grown impatient. Clara Hayes, the reluctant investigator who hadn't slept in 2 nights, opened her blinds and immediately sensed it. She would later describe the vision like this: the street wasn't quiet. It was held, like someone had wrapped their hand around the whole neighborhood and squeezed the sound out of it. Her window looked over the cul-de-sac, where the entity had first manifested in part 4, where the dog had disappeared into the asphalt, where the mailboxes had twisted into angles that defied geometry for several minutes before reverting back. Everything seemed normal now. The mailboxes were upright. The street was dry. No cracks, no shadows. But she noticed a detail that only someone who has been chased by fear can recognize. Nothing was moving. No leaves, no curtains, no cars, not even a single bird crossing the sky. The world was stuck between inhale and exhale. That was the first sign. The second sign: every watch in the neighborhood stopped. 7:21 a.m. We know now, after the investigation, after the testimonies, after the digital reconstructions, that every mechanical watch, digital clock, stove timer, thermostat, and phone in Ashridge Vale froze at 7:21:16 a.m. Not died, not lost connection, not glitched. Froze. And here's the nightmare part. The devices all froze on different seconds, but the same minute. Some clocks stopped at 3, some at 11, some at 58. Never the same second. Always the same minute. The entity was practicing, testing its reach, pressing its fingers through the membrane of reality, time, and structure, expanding its influence from under the HOA's foundation. Clara didn't know the scope yet. She only saw her bedside clock stuck at 7:21:16, her phone stuck at 7:21:16, her microwave, her oven, everything. She walked into her living room, and as soon as she stepped over the center rug, her ears popped, like she'd walked into a pressure chamber. She staggered, held the wall, felt the surge of a deep, unseen vibration pass through her bones. The house was adjusting. The entity was taking interest. And then, the first scream of the day shattered the stillness. The scream from Maple Drive, the old Reynolds house. Witnesses, those few who remain, claim the scream came from the Reynolds place. A 2-story brick home with white shutters, always perfectly trimmed bushes, always spotless siding. The HOA had fined that house 13 times in 3 months for minor violations. A garden hose not rolled correctly, a bird feeder improperly aligned, curtains that were not neutral enough, a shadow extending beyond permitted limits. Yes, that was one of the violations. But the Reynolds never complained. They paid silently. They waved at neighbors. They attended meetings without speaking. And perhaps now we know why. They knew what the HOA was, and they feared it. That morning, their front door blasted open like someone had kicked it from inside. A woman staggered out, Mrs. Reynolds, hands trembling, hair tangled, eyes sunken like she hadn't slept in days. She screamed again, but this time it wasn't a cry for help. It was a warning. Don't let them in. They aren't them anymore. Before anyone could understand what she meant, she pointed back toward her house, toward the dim corridor inside, and the door behind her slowly, silently closed, on its own. The same door she had burst through seconds earlier. She ran, barefoot, across the silent street. Her feet slapped the pavement with no echo, and every home she passed, their lights flickered in sequence, as if reacting, as if watching, as if communicating. Clara intervenes. Clara rushed outside, still in her nightclothes, still clutching the file of forbidden HOA documents she retrieved in Part 3. Mrs. Reynolds collapsed into her arms. She kept saying the same thing, Clara later reported. They're not them anymore. They're not them anymore. When Clara asked, "Who isn't?" Mrs. Reynolds looked up with eyes that were too wide, too hollow. The board. They're supposed to be dead. A gust of warm, stagnant air rolled across the street like a slow exhale. Not wind, just movement. The second sign of the entity. Clara felt the vibration again. The soundless hum beneath her feet. The pressure behind her eardrums. The HOA board was missing. Clara had already discovered evidence they had been performing rituals in the underground chamber. And now a witness was saying they were dead. It didn't take Clara long to understand what that meant. The entity had replaced them. The dead board members walked the streets. 7:48 a.m. Several cameras, doorbells, security cams, a Nest system captured the same anomaly at the same time. 3 HOA board members walking slowly down Birch Lane Street. Their movement was wrong, jerky, delayed, like a bad puppet performance. Their heads slightly tilted, faces expressionless, eyes glossy like wet stones. One held a clipboard, another held a measuring tape. The third, a tall man known for being overly strict, dragged a long wooden stick behind him, the end scraping against the asphalt with a searing screech. But here's the part that still gives investigators nightmares. The clothes were dirty, dusty, covered in bits of black residue. And the timestamp on that footage? They had died at least 12 hours earlier, but their bodies kept moving. Not as individuals, not as people, but as vessels, temporary extensions of the entity's influence, a collective host. It wasn't possessing them, it was wearing them. The silence deepens. As the board approached the center of the neighborhood, the air pressure shift intensified. Clara would later describe it like this: you couldn't hear them walk. You couldn't hear the stick. You couldn't hear anything. The world just went mute around them. Mrs. Reynolds, still trembling, whispered, "It listens through them." Clara grabbed her wrist. "What listens?" But before she could answer, all 3 board members stopped moving at once, their heads snapping toward Clara and Mrs. Reynolds in perfect synchrony. A single motion, single angle, single tilt, like 3. And then, without opening their mouths, without making a breath, a whisper crawled out of the silence. Violation detected. Violation? For what? Clara froze. Mrs. Reynolds' grip tightened. The board members raised their clipboards in unison. One pointed at Clara, one at Mrs. Reynolds, one at the open Reynolds front door. And the whisper came again, this time layered, distorted, like multiple versions of the same voice stacked on top of each other. Unauthorized resistance, unauthorized knowledge, unauthorized truth. Clara's voice shook. "What do you want?" And then, and this was reported identically by 5 separate witnesses, all 3 board members lifted their left hands, bent their fingers backward at impossible angles, and pointed toward the ground. The asphalt beneath Clara's feet rippled. Like liquid, like breathing, like something underneath was waking. Mrs. Reynolds screamed. Clara pulled her away just in time as the ground split open in a clean, perfect line under the spot where they stood. Black dust hissed out, warm, almost alive. Clara recognized it. It was the same material she found in the ritual chamber. The same dust covering the dead board members' clothes. The same residue in the cracks forming under the houses. The neighborhood wasn't cursed. It was infected. The evacuation that failed. A few families attempted to flee. Cars roared down the street, except no engine made a sound. No tire screeched. No honk echoed. They moved silently, terrifyingly silently. And then, as each car reached the exit road, they stopped, dead. Not crashed, not stalled, just ceased. Like toys whose batteries had been pulled out mid-motion. The families stumbled out, panicked, screaming, but their screams made no sound either. Throats straining, mouths open wide, but no audio. The silence had consumed them. Even worse, their shadows appeared to delay, lag, drag behind them by a half-second. That was the first sign the entity was gaining full control. It was rewriting reality. Clara's final attempt to fight back. Clara dragged Mrs. Reynolds toward her home, slamming the door shut behind them. Inside, sound returned, barely. A faint hum, a soft, trembling resonance. The house wasn't safe. But it was less exposed. Clara spread the documents across the table. The list of missing families. The forbidden architectural blueprint, the ritual instructions, the ledger that detailed the quarterly offering, and the map. The underground network beneath Ashridge Vale, the tunnels, the meeting chambers, the ritual sites. All of them connected, all of them converging to a single point. The central pit, the first construction site. The oldest part of the neighborhood. The place the HOA never allowed anyone to visit. Clara realized what the entity wanted. It wasn't the people. It was the ritual being broken. The HOA used to give it something every month. A sacrifice, a life, a resident chosen. But then the board died. The ritual stopped. And the entity awakened fully, ravenous. Clara whispered, "It's not them. It's what's underneath." Mrs. Reynolds nodded with trembling lips. "And if we don't finish the ritual, it will consume everything." The last 10 minutes before the collapse, a deep rumble shook the neighborhood. Dust fell from ceilings. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. Phones restarted on their own, screens glitching violently. Every screen, and we mean every screen, displayed the same message. HOA emergency notification. Stay in your homes. The offering is in progress. Clara shouted at the TV. "There is no board. They're dead." As if hearing her, the broadcast shifted abruptly. Static, lines. Then a symbol. A circle of houses surrounding a black pit with a single eye in the center. The true HOA emblem. The original. The one she saw in the underground chamber. Mrs. Reynolds collapsed into a chair, crying silently. It's calling everyone to the pit. Clara realized the truth. The entity wasn't trying to kill them. It was trying to summon them. A community offering, a mass ritual. The board had always been just a mask, an intermediary. Now, the creature wanted its tribute directly, all at once. The collapse. At exactly 9 a.m., every house's foundation cracked simultaneously. Technology died. Power vanished. The sky darkened as if pulled inward. And then the street surface sank, one smooth descent, funneling everything toward the pit below like a massive drain. Cars slid. Porches tore free. Sidewalks folded like paper. People screamed, but no one heard them. Clara held onto a fence, gripping Mrs. Reynolds with her other hand. Mrs. Reynolds lost her footing. Clara refused to let go. The wind, If it was wind, whipped upward, pulling debris, dust, furniture, lawn decorations, entire sections of homes into the pit's widening maw. The sound finally returned, a deafening roar of air, a deep, ancient groan from beneath the earth, a whisper layered within it. All of you. Clara looked down, and for the first time, caught a glimpse of it, the shape writhing below, the mass of shadow and bone, the void that pulsed like a living organ, the entity, the heart of the HOA. The final moments. As Clara's feet slid toward the abyss, she made one final decision. She grabbed the ledger, the book that held the ritual's instructions, and hurled it into the pit. The entity recoiled. The funnel of collapsing earth halted. The entire neighborhood froze mid-destruction, like reality hit pause. Mrs. Reynolds gasped. Clara whispered, "Take your offering. Leave the people." For a heartbeat, the entity listened. And then a final whisper echoed up the tunnel. "Accepted." The ground closed. The pressure snapped back. The silence vanished, and the neighborhood, what remained of it, stopped collapsing. Clara collapsed with it, exhausted, shaking, alive. But the street, the scars, the hollow where the pit had been, remained, and everyone who survived knew they weren't free. Not yet. Because the true horror wasn't that the entity accepted the offering. It was what the offering actually meant. And that truth, the final revelation. Ask anyone who survived the collapse of Ashridge Vale what happened after the ground sealed itself, and they'll tell you the same thing. They thought it was over. They thought the entity had taken what it wanted, that the sacrifice Clara threw into the pit, the ledger, was enough to satisfy the thing beneath the earth. But survival is not victory. Survival is debt, and what none of them knew, what none of them were meant to know, was that the entity hadn't accepted an offering. It had accepted an agreement, a renewal, a contract thousands of pages long, written in symbols older than language itself, a contract the HOA board had been upholding for decades, and Clara Hayes, thinking she had saved the neighborhood, had actually signed it again, not with ink, not with blood, but with intention, the most binding currency the entity understood. This is the part of the story the remaining residents refused to discuss publicly, the part the state sealed behind redacted documents, the part that no investigator, no documentary crew, no journalist was ever allowed to publish. This is the part the HOA survived for. This is part 6. 1. The quiet after the collapse. 9:13 a.m. When the ground sealed shut and the chaos fell still, silence washed over Ashridge Vale again. But this time, it was natural silence. The kind you hear after a storm, after something monstrous has already happened. Distant sirens finally echoed from beyond the neighborhood's borders. Power flickered back. Lights returned. And for the first time in hours, birds began chirping again. Normalcy re-entered the world. Cautiously. Like an animal sniffing its way back into an environment where a predator once roamed. Some were crying. Some collapsed to their knees. Some clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. No one spoke, because no one understood. Not yet. Not what they had survived. Not what they had agreed to. Not what the entity had taken and what it had left. And above them, the sky finally began to clear. A soft ray of sunlight pushed through the clouds, illuminating the wreckage of Ashridge Vale like a spotlight in a courtroom. A neighborhood awaiting its verdict. What they didn't realize was that the verdict had already been delivered. 2. Emergency responders arrive, and something impossible happens. 10:02 a.m. Police, fire crews, ambulances, disaster management teams. They flooded into Ashridge Vale, or tried to. The footage from outside security cams shows something disturbing. The first responders who crossed into the neighborhood slowed down. Not physically, temporally. Their movements dragged at half speed. Then, as if the air had thickened, as if time hadn't fully returned to normal inside the neighborhood. Then, the responders froze. Not like statues, more like buffering images, glitching frames in a corrupted video. The survivors screamed. They ran toward the rescuers, but halfway there, their bodies jerked violently, snapping back as if pulled by invisible hooks. Something prevented them from leaving the bounds of Ashridge Vale. Something held them inside. Something that had been renewed. Clara saw this first, and she understood what it meant. "It's not letting us go," she whispered. Mrs. Reynolds nodded slowly, horror dawning across her face. The contract wasn't broken. It was restarted. The entity had never been about death. It had always been about containment. Containment of itself, containment of the residents, or containment of something worse. No one knew. Not then. 3. The black dust returns. 11:14 a.m. While responders were still stuck frozen outside the neighborhood, residents noticed something spreading across the cracked concrete. The black dust, but not like before. It didn't spill violently, or hiss, or erupt. It drifted, soft, slow, controlled, like ash from a distant fire. It settled into the cracks of the street, into the seams of sidewalks, into the splinters of the torn foundations. And then the dust began to pulse, a rhythmic, gentle beat, like the neighborhood was breathing, like it was healing. Clara knelt down and touched the dust. Bad idea. The dust latched to her skin instantly. Her vision blurred, her breath caught, her pulse synchronized with the ground. She saw, for just a moment, the entity's perspective, an ocean of tunnels beneath the houses, vast chambers, pulsing roots, old symbols etched into stone walls, a network of veins, and the truth, the entity was not one being. It was a system, a structure, a living architecture fused with the HOA. It didn't reside beneath the neighborhood. The neighborhood resided inside it. Clara ripped her hand away, gasping. She had learned too much, and the entity knew it. 4. The return of the board. 11:59 a.m. Residents gathered in the central cul-de-sac, drawn together by fear, exhaustion, and a need for answers. Clara tried to speak to them, but before she could, the board members appeared again, all three, walking normally, faces alive, eyes blinking, breathing, as if they were perfectly human, as if they had never been puppets, as if they had never died. They stood at the center of the street with unnatural calmness, dust settling on their shoulders like snowfall. No one dared move. Vast chambers, pulsing roots, old symbols etched into stone walls, a network of veins. Then the president smiled pleasantly, as if greeting neighbors at a barbecue. "Thank you all for participating in our emergency drill." Clara's jaw dropped. Mrs. Reynolds stumbled backward. Residents exchanged horrified glances. The president continued cheerfully. "We understand it caused some confusion. Rest assured, everything is under control. We appreciate your cooperation. Everything about him was wrong. His posture, his voice, the way his joints moved with subtle delay. He was alive, but not alive. Reanimated, refilled, re-inhabited. A vessel with memories downloaded back into it. A perfect HOA puppet." Clara shouted, "You're dead! We saw your bodies! We saw the pit!" The board members all turned to her slowly, too slowly. The president smiled wider. Miss Hayes, you seem distressed. We assure you everything you saw was part of... The treasurer stepped forward. The ledger was a contract. You submitted it. The entity accepted it. You renewed the covenant on behalf of the community. Clara collapsed to her knees. Mrs. Reynolds tried to pull her up, whispering, Clara, what did you do? Clara whispered back, voice breaking, I didn't throw away the offering. I delivered it. The new rules are announced. 12:08 p.m. Residents backed away as the board opened a long scroll, identical to the one Clara found weeks earlier. The president read in a steady, pleasant tone. In accordance with the renewal of the Ashridge Covenant, new community guidelines are now in place. He raised his eyes to the group. Rule 1. No resident may leave the community without board approval. People gasped. Some cried out. Rule 2. Silence must be maintained during designated hours. Rule 3. The offering will take place quarterly. Clara screamed. No, I didn't. Rule 4. One resident will be selected each quarter. The choice is final. Residents began shouting, silent at first, then sound returned as the entity allowed it. Panic exploded. People ran. People pounded on the invisible barrier at the neighborhood's edge. People tried breaking windows, smashing doors, climbing fences. No one escaped. The board watched with smiles, friendly, empty, in control. Then the president looked directly at Clara, eyes glowing faintly with the same black residue. Miss Hayes, as the one who renewed the covenant, you will assist us in conducting future offerings. Clara screamed until her voice failed. 6. The entity marks the first name. 12:30 p.m. Black dust began drifting through the air again. It swirled, coiled, formed shapes, letters. One resident pointed upward, trembling. It's spelling something. Clara turned, and the dust in the air spiraled into words for all to read. First offering, Clara Hayes. Mrs. Reynolds collapsed in shock. Residents backed away in terror, afraid to be near her. Clara's heart stopped, not figuratively, literally. She felt her pulse seize, her veins tighten, her breath disappear. The entity had chosen her. The board nodded approvingly. Excellent choice. Clara gasped, clawing at her chest as the pressure increased. She staggered backward, and the ground behind her began to split, a narrow fissure opening like a hungry mouth. Black dust poured upward. The air vibrated. The houses trembled. Mrs. Reynolds grabbed Clara's arm. Run! But there was nowhere to run. The fissure widened. The entity surged upward, tendrils of shadow reaching. Clara screamed. But then something strange happened. The tendril stopped, paused, frozen inches from her skin. A whisper rolled across the neighborhood. Not yet! The tendrils withdrew. The fissure sealed. Residents stared in disbelief. The board president stepped forward, still smiling, still pleasant. Miss Hayes, although you are the first to be selected, the offering is not due until the end of the quarter. He held out a long, elegant finger toward her. You have 90 days. Clara collapsed to the pavement, sobbing. 90 days. And then she would be taken. Unless there was another way. 7. Clara's final decision. 3 p.m. Hours passed. Chaos settled into dread. People barricaded themselves inside homes. Windows locked, doors bolted. But the entity didn't punish them for hiding. It didn't need to. They were already trapped. Clara sat alone on the ruins of her porch, staring at the sky as dusk settled in, casting long shadows across Ashridge Vale. She thought about leaving, running, trying again to break the barrier. But she knew it would kill her. She thought about giving up, letting the entity take her, ending the nightmare. But she knew that wouldn't save anyone. The entity didn't want one life. It wanted continuation, obedience, control, a system, a community, a covenant. So Clara made her choice. She stood, wiping tears and dust from her face. She walked toward the center of the cul-de-sac. She placed both hands on the cracked asphalt, the thin shell above the pit, and she spoke aloud. "I want to renegotiate." The ground pulsed, the black dust swirled. The board stepped out of a nearby shadow, smiling as always. "Negotiation requires sacrifice." Clara nodded, her voice steady now, resolved. "I know." The treasurer tilted his head. "What will you offer?" Clara swallowed, looked around at the neighbors hiding behind curtains. People who feared her, people she once tried to save. Then she breathed out, "Me." Mrs. Reynolds screamed from a distance, "No!" But Clara continued, "Take me now, but release the neighborhood. Remove the covenant from them. Bind it to me alone." The ground stilled. The air froze. Even the wind stopped. The entity listened. Then the board president stepped forward, smiling wider, too wide. "Agreed." The fissure opened beneath Clara instantly. Black tendrils wrapped around her legs, arms, waist, but she didn't resist. She looked at the neighborhood one last time, not with fear, with peace, because she knew someone had to end the cycle. Someone had to become the vessel. Better her than hundreds. Mrs. Reynolds screamed her name until her voice broke. Clara whispered back, "Live." Then the entity pulled her downward, and she vanished. The fissure sealed. The dust settled. The sky cleared. The barrier dissolved. Residents found they can walk out of Ashwood Vale again. Emergency responders flooded in. People cried, collapsed, ran for freedom. But one thing remained, etched into the street where Clara disappeared. "The covenant has been transferred. Do not interfere." 8. One last twist, the ending. Weeks later, life returned to normal. Or so people claimed. The neighborhood was abandoned, deemed unsafe, marked for demolition. But before the demolitions began, inspectors noticed something strange. A single house still had electricity. Lights on, curtains drawn, front door locked. Clara's house. They broke in. What they found is sealed in classified documents. But former workers whispered about it years later. Claw marks on the floor, roots growing through the walls, symbols etched into the ceiling. The house's foundation, rewritten, alive, breathing. And in the basement, a single line scrawled across the concrete. 90 days remaining. But one thing remained, etched into the street where Clara disappeared. Beneath the message, a shadow that didn't belong to anyone in the room. And when they turned to leave, the lights flickered, and a whisper followed them out. "The community will expand." Clara wasn't gone. She wasn't sacrificed. She was becoming. And the entity, the living architecture, the ancient system, the HOA beneath the HOA, had chosen her as its new vessel, its new board, its new beginning. Ashwood Vale was no longer the prison. Clara was. And she was destined to open new neighborhoods, new covenants, new offerings, because the HOA is eternal, and the entity was never just beneath Ashwood Vale. It was beneath everywhere, waiting for the right signature, waiting for the right person.